All right, let's get right into it. On September 10th, a really shocking event took place. Conservative activist Charlie Kirk was shot and killed while on a university campus. I mean, just a stunning moment. But what happened next was this insane, frantic 33-hour search for the killer, a search that ended with an arrest, and left us with a portrait of the suspect that is just, well, it's deeply confusing.
Right out of the gate, officials were not messing around. They called it a political assassination. Think about that. They weren't treating this as some random act of violence. That specific label, political assassination, immediately raises the stakes and frames this as an attack on something much bigger than just one person.
So those first 33 hours were just a total whirlwind. It all kicks off on September 10th at Utah Valley University. A massive manhunt gets going almost immediately. And then, believe it or not, by the evening of the next day, September 11th, they have a suspect in custody, Tyler Robinson. It was incredibly fast, incredibly intense, and we're going to break down exactly how it all went down.
Okay, so let's set the scene. A university campus, a speaking event, it's a setting we're all familiar with, right? And it was just completely shattered. The first few moments were, as you can imagine, pure chaos, but investigators got to work fast, trying to piece it all together.
Pretty quickly, law enforcement sources started revealing some key details. The weapon they say was used? An older model Mauser rifle. And get this, it was found wrapped in a towel. That little detail suggests, a certain level of planning, a real attempted concealment.
So with the crime established, the clock starts ticking on what became one of the most intense manhunts in recent memory. For 33 hours, the killer was basically a ghost, and law enforcement agencies were pulling out every single stop to find them.
The public response was just huge. Authorities were absolutely flooded with tips and leads from all over the country. We're talking over 7,000 of them.
And it wasn't just about sifting through all that data, right? While those thousands of tips were pouring in, investigators on the ground were moving at a breakneck pace. They conducted around 200 interviews in that same super short window of time. It just gives you a sense of the incredible scale and speed of this operation. But the real turning point, the game changer, came from the FBI. They released these grainy photos of a person of interest to the public. And that move, it basically deputized millions of people, turning the search into this massive collective effort. And, as you're about to see, that's exactly what blew the case wide open.
This massive manhunt didn't end with some dramatic raid or a crazy car chase. Nope, it ended with a phone call. A father, looking at the news, recognized the face in those FBI photos as his own son. And that moment, right there, brought the entire national search to a quiet and unbelievably dramatic halt.
Just 6 words. That's all it took from Utah's Governor Spencer Cox to let the entire country know the search was over. We got him. You can just imagine the collective sigh of relief. The suspect was finally in custody.
So how did it actually go down? Well, it all started when the father saw those FBI photos and knew, that's my son Tyler. He confronts him, tells him he has to surrender. Tyler apparently refused at first, but then he agreed. The father then makes this really critical decision. He doesn't call 911. He calls a youth pastor he knows, who also just happens to be a U.S. Marshals Task Force officer. That officer then guided the family through the process and got the FBI involved.
And this is just a remarkable detail. The governor went out of his way to publicly thank the suspect's family. It really shines a light on the incredibly difficult, almost unimaginable decision they had to make, and how they chose to do what they believed was the right thing.
So with the suspect caught, the big question changed from who did it to a much more complex one. Who is this person? And now the public had a name, Tyler Robinson. But the picture that started to emerge, well, it's complicated and full of contradictions. So let's cover the basics. Tyler Robinson is 22. He's a former student at Utah State, but he was currently enrolled at a technical college. And politically, his voter registration shows no party preference, and his status is listed as inactive.
Okay, and this is where the picture just gets so murky. On the one hand, you talk to his neighbors, and they paint this picture of a good kid, quiet, reserved, friendly, smart, someone who they never heard talk political. But then you look at what officials are alleging. A political assassination, a pre-planned rifle drop, these bizarre engraved messages on shell casings. I mean, how do you even begin to reconcile those two completely different people?
And just to add another layer to this whole puzzle, his intelligence. He reportedly scored a 34 on the ACT. To put that in perspective, that puts him in the top 1% of students in the entire country. His own mother even called him a genius on social media.
So we're not just talking about a quiet kid, we're talking about an exceptionally bright one.
Now, if you're trying to find some kind of political motive, the picture is, again, really mixed. You've got Robinson himself, an inactive voter with no party, but then his parents are both registered Republicans. His dad's social media had posts that were critical of Democrats, and maybe most importantly, officials say there was a conversation where Robinson and a family member both expressed a dislike for Charlie Kirk and his viewpoints.
And then there's this. This might be one of the most bizarre pieces of evidence. The unfired shell casings found at the scene were allegedly engraved with messages. One was a taunt, "Hey fascist, catch," with arrows. Another had lyrics from an Italian anti-fascist song. And a third? A crude, juvenile joke. What does this mean? Is it ideology, a clumsy attempt at misdirection, or something else entirely? Investigators are still trying to wrap their heads around it.
So in the end, we're left with this huge conflict. The portrait of Tyler Robinson is just full of these stark contradictions. Is he the quiet, high-achieving kid next door, or is he the political extremist that prosecutors allege? As this all moves through the legal system, the one giant question that hangs over absolutely everything is the one we still can't answer. Why?